Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to East Gippsland Shire Council's unscheduled meeting of the 18th of May 2021. East Gippsland Shire Council live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting, youtube.com/c/eastgippytv to enhance the accessibility of its meetings to the broader East Gippsland community. These recordings are also archived and available for viewing by the public or used for publicity or information purposes. At the appropriate times during the meeting, any members of the gallery who are addressing the council will have their image, comments or submissions recorded. No other person has the right to record council meetings unless approval has been granted by the chair. The Victorian Government has amended the COVID-19 Omnibus Emergency Measures and Other Acts Amendment Act 2020 that enables council meetings to be conducted by electronic means, video conferencing, until the 26th of April 2022. The Minister for Local Government reissued the Ministerial Good Practice Guideline for virtual meetings on the 20th of October 2020, outlining the provisions relating to the Local Government Act 2020 allow councils to attend council meetings electronically, and the requirement where council meetings are open to the public will be satisfied where the meeting is live streamed. The amendments do not preclude councillors from attending a meeting in person in the council chambers. Members of the public are invited to view the council meeting live streamed by following the link on council's website or Facebook page. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land. East Gippsland Shire Council acknowledges the Gunai Kurnai, Monero and the Bidwell people as the traditional custodians of the land that encompasses East Gippsland Shire. We pay our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living in East Gippsland, their elders past and present. So I'll now go on to the procedural items of this meeting. So 1.2, I beg your pardon, 1.3 is for apologies. Mr. CEO, do we have apologies this morning?
Mayor, I have one apology from Councillor Reeves.
Thank you. Item 1.4.
Have we done 1.2?
Oh, sorry.
Mayor?
Purpose of the meeting. Beg your pardon, I skipped that bit. Purpose of the meeting. In accordance with Rule 3.3 of East Gippsland Shire Council Governance Rules, councillors Allen, Buckley and White requested an unscheduled council meeting to consider the motion to alter the council resolution of Tuesday the 4th of May 2021 regarding item 6, feral horse management, proposed by councillors Crook, Greason, OAM and Reeves. The Chief Executive Officer, as required under Rule 3.3 of East Gippsland Shire Council Governance Rules, gives notice of the unscheduled council meeting to be held on Tuesday the 18th of May 2021 at 9 a.m. So thank you, that was the purpose of this meeting. So we have one apology. Item 1.4 is declaration of conflict of interest. Councillors, are there any declarations? Councillor Buckley, I just would like to express a concern that you may have a conflict in this item. I'm concerned that you are promoting a resolution to this issue whereby the buck runners would have an ongoing role in at least partially controlling the brumbies in the high country. As a buck runner, I'm concerned that your son would stand to gain financially if this was the case. I'm concerned that there is potentially a material conflict of interest here. Would you like to respond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sit on. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I was under the impression that if a conflict of interest was the case, that it's actually up to the councillor to express the conflict of interest, because if it's anybody's right to express a conflict of interest. I would suggest that Councillor Tom Crook has got a conflict of interest because of his business in and being employed as an environmental
Councillor Buckley,
agency.
I'll just
So
ask you
therefore
to I think you would be
that,
free to
but-
do that, but would you
Right.
mind responding to my question
Sure.
initially?
There is absolutely no foundation of my son gaining financial interest. He has never had financial interest or pecuniary interest in selling horses. He has a traditional skill set where he goes out and uses his cultural heritage to help reduce numbers of horses in the environment, which is doing the management plan a great service. So no, there is absolutely no conflict of interest. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. So now you would like to pose a question about one of the other councillors.
Well, I assumed, and I would like to pose the question to governance, that it is the right procedure for a councillor to declare a conflict of interest, not to be brought to the attention of the councillors by another councillor. But if that's the case and we are able
Maybe
to
we
do
can
so...
seek an answer to that question in the first instance.
No, well,
Councillor
I'd like
Buckley.
to segue into, if that is the case, which you've already done, Councillor Crook would definitely have a conflict of interest to declare because he has financial gain in speaking on environmental matters because that's what his main purpose of business is.
Okay, I wonder if I can ask Ms De Costa, please, to respond.
Sure. A question can be posed by another councillor. It will always be a question posed, and it would be the interest in transparency and governance to ensure that we're upholding good governance principles under Section 9. However, the onus is always on the individual councillor to respond and determine which way or another.
Thank you. So I pose the question to Councillor Crook. Do you have a conflict of interest in regards to this matter?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Crook.
I believe I have an ongoing interest in matters related to environmental management. It's a field in which I work in professionally, most certainly. Do I have a material conflict of interest in the outcomes of this particular decision? No. No, I don't.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Item 1.5, the next meeting of this council is on the 25th of May 2021 to be held in the council chamber at 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale, commencing at 6 p.m. Item 1.6 on the agenda is for open forum. Mr CEO, do we have any items from the community?
Thanks, Mayor. So we do not have any petitions or questions of council. I do, however, have two public submissions that have been asked to be tabled. Firstly, one from Phil Ingemels, Park Protection at Victorian National Parks Association. So that will form part of the minutes. And also from Judith Medway, who has raised some issues with council around Brumby management and also will be tabled and included in the minutes. But I would also just like to advise the community that there has been a significant number of email submissions broadly to councillors around this issue, both for and against the particular matter that's being discussed today. So just wanted to give the community reassurance that those emails have been circulated to all councils and have been part of the, I guess, information that is being considered in today's debate. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr CEO. So we move on to item 2, which is the business of this meeting, the notices of motion. So this is just to discuss the notice to alter number 3, 2021, amend council resolution on draft feral horse action plan. So do we have a mover of this motion? Councillor Greason, thank you. What is the motion?
The motion is that the council writes to the Honourable Lily D'Ambrosio, Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change, to 1, request a meeting to discuss the draft feral horse action plan and the long-term management and extraction of wild horses from national parks in East Gippsland, And 2, request that the draft Feral Horse Action Plan 2021 be put on hold until the matter is discussed with stakeholders.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Is that motion seconded? Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Mayor. My proposal to alter the motion that was passed at the May 4th Council meeting is to enable any discussion about the Parks Victoria draft proposal to occur without the caveat of excluding shooting. I think the issue of shooting is separate from the broader discussion about managing the herds of horses in the park. I say this because to date any culling has involved killing horses, whether they've been passively trapped using salt licks to attract them into a holding yard or lassoed by Brumby runners. They're assessed for rehoming, and those not appropriate are trucked to an abattoir and killed there, so they're being killed anyway. Shooting them where they are assessed seems to be a less cruel way to dispatch these horses when compared with the stress they go through when trucked out and killed at an abattoir. And it is my opinion that shooting is preferable to other forms of killing animals so long as it is done by professionals, and so that if the first shot does not kill, the second shot can happen immediately. In the past week I've done many hours of homework on this subject, and I've done it because Councillor Buckley is so passionate about it, as are some other people. There is no equivalent reaction to using shooting as a method of managing and culling other feral animals that harm the environment, such as wild pigs, dogs, deer, foxes, cats, rabbits and goats. Culling native animals such as kangaroos and koalas is difficult for many people to accept, and recently Council was asked to consider the issue of culling kangaroos, and the majority felt that it's a state issue, not a local government one, and did not discuss it. The culling of brumbies is a state issue also, not a local government one. However, the horror some people feel at the thought of shooting horses needs to be considered by us if the Feral Horse Action Plan goes ahead. It engenders a strong reaction that transports this issue into another realm and could negatively impact on this council in the future. For me personally, the emotional reaction to killing any animal is the same. However, I deal with that because I believe the harm done by feral animals justifies killing them as the most realistic way to remove them. I think shooting is not really the issue here. My homework has included reading the scientific evidence that supports the need for the wild horses to be removed from significant and sensitive areas of the park. I've watched 8 videos, including 3 made by Councillor Buckley, read what the Australian Brumby Association has to say, read various other reports about the issue, including why the New South Wales government decided to ban aerial shooting, and also extracts from a nice book called Saving the Snowy Brumbies by 2 authors who've written other books about saving brumbies in various parts of the world. I quote from one of Councillor Buckley's interviews, this one with Peter Sandy, who states, "Certainly they are thick in some areas and something must be done to manage them. It is abundantly clear that there are people both locally and all over the world who are extremely passionate about the killing of wild horses and want to protect them, and I accept this. I'm keen to support the most humane way to reduce their numbers as well as to extract them from environmentally sensitive areas. Simplistically, I wonder if we could ask the state government to help committed Brumby supporters to obtain, lots of land, 50,000 acres in a non-environmentally sensitive area, and then passively trap and transport the high country Brumbies to this area. It could become a great tourist attraction. It would cost a lot of money, but it could end up being an attractive business proposition for someone. I conclude by saying that I support the need for discussion with stakeholders, and I would like there to be consideration of other ways to manage this emotive issue. And I put the altered motion to you, which simply removes the reference to shooting, because I want this discussion to occur in an open, unbiased way where all the facts can be put to us and we can weigh up the pros and cons objectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam
Sorry,
Mayor.
before you begin, I'll just remind councillors about speaking times. So Councillor Greason, as the mover of the motion, had 5 minutes. Everybody else, 3 minutes. Thank you.
No worries. Look, after our last meeting, the councillor group was contacted by a nationally recognised expert on landscape ecology and animal population management, Professor Don Driscoll from Deakin University. Professor Driscoll urged councillors to care for the native plants and animals found in our alpine national parks. The plants and animals that the park was created in large part to protect and look after. These plants and animals that are found nowhere else on the planet. The professor urged us to support horse management measures that were demonstrated to be the most ethical and humane available, and then proceeded to provide much of the evidence and science behind why this is in fact the case. Councillors, I was elected on a commitment to make evidence-based decisions, and I will continue to honour that commitment by voting for this amended motion today. I took the opportunity to read much of the material provided by the professor and can assure fellow councillors who, maybe for whatever reason, didn't take up this offer, that there is now over 10,000 feral horses in our alpine national parks, and that while other pest animals, such as deer and pigs, are also causing much damage to this unique environment, the direct damage done to these fragile ecosystems is mostly being done by the horses. So, in putting my feelings to one side and considering the evidence, it's clear something needs to be done. And that something includes using the available tools we have to manage and reduce the horse populations, not least because there is ongoing suffering each and every year while we don't. That's right, make no mistake, this is a brutal problem. And by not taking the necessary action, you are also sentencing many, many horses to starve and die, distressed and in pain. Or in the good years, to breed up only to die naturally and provide additional food for wild dogs and foxes. In fact, the research on animal welfare and ethics is conclusive that it's much more humane to shoot a horse than it is to leave it to starve. And unfortunately, that is the choice that we are faced with. Other methods alone have been unable, despite repeated attempts to do what is needed and reduce the populations. Clearly, some councillors don't agree with this, but let's not forget there's little evidence or data to substantiate the other claims, and rather they choose on ideological grounds not to act, not to protect the native plants and animals of the high country, the Alpine National Park, and rather choose to condemn and sentence them to a death of 1,000 cuts. It's not the horses' fault that they're in our parks. People put them there. But they shouldn't be in our parks. These are parks, not paddocks. I say to my fellow councillors, native animals have feelings too, and they, unlike the horses, have nowhere else to go.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Crook. Is the motion opposed? You wish to speak against the motion, Councillor Buckley?
Just briefly.
Just briefly, 3 minutes. You have the whole 3 minutes.
Thank you. Look, thank you, Councillor Grecian and Councillor Crook. I think it's well known that some of your statements have been highly questioned in regards to numbers, and also when we talk of Professor Driscoll, who is widely acclaimed for his statement that horses are carnivorous and eat each other, one would have to question anything that Professor Driscoll has to say. But regardless of that, I think we can all agree that we must ensure the best management practices for our parks, and the best way forward, in my view, is to make sure that we use those best management practices using cultural, traditional skill set. And I will completely deny the accusations of Councillor Grecian that all these horses are shipped to knackeries. They are not. The statistics that have not been looked at are evident in the many homes and childhoods of us all who have been living in the mountains, and the mountain culture that allows us to be able to take these horses out in a humane way. What is missing is the political will to support the local people to do exactly that, to rehome them, to take them to sanctuaries. I love that idea. I think that's one that we should look at, and that we have manageable numbers left in the parks. No one wants to see the parks in a poor state. That we can all agree upon. So there's common ground here, councillors, but to change the resolution of what we decided upon, that we expressed council's objection to helicopter shooting and ground shooting of wild horses, to alter that, in my view, Changing the resolution would have the effect of depriving the resolution of its usefulness when we meet with the state government. We must stand strong on being humane and doing the right thing by the horses, and we can do that, and we can do it successfully. But we must acknowledge that there is a culture that exists in the high country that deserves heritage listing and deserves to be strongly supported. So that's my passion, and I hope that we can achieve that. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Does anybody else wish to speak for the motion? Pardon me, I'm going to, as the chair of this meeting, it's not... Absolutely. I'll give everybody, I think it's really important to give everybody an opportunity to speak either for or against the motion. I'm going to take the opportunity to speak for the motion. I know this is not really convention, but councillors have received a lot of emails challenging us about our views on this issue, and I want to put my views on the table. So I'm going to speak. I support part one of the motion. I'm not so supportive of part two because I don't know how council would enact that. But I'm going to vote in favour of the motion as I think it's preferable to the motion which is the current resolution as voted on the 4th of May. Regarding part one of the motion before us, I believe if enacted, the proposed motion would provide councillors the ability to discuss their issues with the minister if the minister agreed to a meeting. Regarding two of the motion before us, I don't think it's the role of this council to conduct discussion with stakeholders. We're not the decision makers here, and the state government strategy, the Draft Feral Horse Action Plan 2021, has had its own process of public consultation. I don't believe the need to control feral animals, and in this case feral horses in the high country, is in dispute, including by myself. In fact, I see that there is a legal requirement to control feral pests, to exterminate or control exotic fauna in the park. I do not support cruelty to animals. I do support evidence-based policy making, and in this issue, I do appreciate that Brumby runners are passionate about their activities and they want to continue. But from my research, I do not think that the actions and control from the Brumby runners and similar will adequately control the numbers, and I do not believe it is the most humane methodology for reducing feral horse numbers in the high country. So, are there other speakers against the motion? Thank you, Councillor White.
I would like to just bring this debate back to the cruelty issue. It was explained to us that they from a helicopter you could get a clean 100% kill every shot. Now that's been refuted. It's now down to perhaps 2 in 3 that would die from a shot. So the rest are wounded and left to, they'll be in severe pain. Now this is my argument about this whole shooting from helicopters. It is not precise. I'm certainly not against cleaning up the alpine areas of all the feral animals because they shouldn't be there. But there must be discussion on a better way to do this. Council was put in a very bad light after the Swifts Creek meeting, basically by animal lovers, just not in favour of cruelty to animals. Now, I would guess that there wouldn't be anybody in this room or listening that would object to the trapping of feral dogs, wild dogs, because of the damage they do and the dangers that exist with wild dogs. But the soft-jawed traps were introduced to stop the cruelty of an animal being caught in a trap for some hours before anyone found it. Now, that's a wild dog that could attack, well, does attack animals, could attack other people within the parks in the right circumstances. So just something like a feral dog is given respect towards cruelty. even though they are really something that none of us want any of them in the park. So I'm coming back around to the fact that until somebody can satisfy us that is a 100% not cruel way to get rid of the horses, I can't support shooting them from the helicopters. So thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor White. Does anybody wish to speak for the motion? Against the motion? Councillor Stowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor White summed up most of my feelings very well, so I won't repeat it all, but I'm a hunter. It's very difficult to shoot a moving target from a moving object like a helicopter. In fact, it's not hard to shoot them. It's almost impossible to kill them with one bullet. So what's going to happen, they're going to bring them down with the first bullet. They'll come back at some stage later and finish them off with the second bullet. There's no doubt about that. Ground shooting is not much different because you've got a mob of horses, perhaps two people shooting them. They'll indiscriminately shoot one or two of them and the others will flee, and they'll be difficult to get those other ones who've been educated. But that's another subject. The biggest problem I have is with the carcasses. Now, depending who you listen to with regards to the numbers up there, the buck runners might say there's 3,000 or 4,000. Tom might say there's 12 or 20,000, whatever. But whatever it is, there's thousands of carcasses going to be left in the bush, thousands of them. And they're going to be predated upon by dogs and by wild pigs. Now, dogs and wild pigs are a far bigger problem than the horses are. If there's lots of food, then they breed up. So the dogs will breed up, the pigs will breed up and create other problems we haven't thought of. Trapping, I've seen it up in the Snowy Mountains. They do it regularly up there in the national parks. It seems a sensible alternative to me, where they put the salt licks out, put the fences out, take the horses away. They rehome those that are suitable to be rehomed, and the rest of them are sent to the knackery, and they get $100, $200 for the knackery horses, and they're put down humanely with one shot. So that's my 2 cents worth on the issue.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Does anybody else wish to speak for or against the motion? No? Councillor Van Diekel?
For me, I agree with what John, Sonia and Trevor have said. I don't feel comfortable with the method of aerial culling if the population is grossly overestimated. From what I've heard and what I've read in Victoria, the numbers, what I read one time was there's 23,000 in Victoria, and the next thing from reliable sources, in my opinion, I hear it's maybe 2,500. So I think that is a major difference, and I don't think aerial culling should be endorsed until they do a more accurate count. I thought you said that to me. Until a more accurate count is done. So purely, I've spoken to a lot of people in the community recently, and they think there's one Brumby per 1,000 deer, 3,000 deer, sorry. I understand that a Brumby is a hard-footed animal and causes more damage, but it is also my opinion that if it was, and I feel like I'm going to get looks for this comment, but if it was as bad for the environment, the damage would have been done, and I know it's done already to some degree, but if you're talking about native vegetation never recovering, I don't think that's true. So I don't feel comfortable with aerial culling as a method if there is actually manageable numbers at this point in time. I think we need to focus on control and not eradicating. I love Jane's idea. If that's something that's one day possible, that's fantastic. But at this point in time, I'm not comfortable with changing that part of the motion, because I really do think that there is better ways to manage the numbers, and I agree with Sonia's suggestions of rehoming. I don't necessarily agree with the knackery. I don't think that putting them in trucks and killing them for $200 is a kinder way than shooting them on the spot, but until a more accurate count is done, I'm not comfortable to support the aerial culling. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Diekel. Councillor Allen, please.
Look, the only thing I'd like to add is that this issue to me comes down to cruelty, and I can't condone something that I know is going to be cruel.
Thank you. Councillor Greason, you have a right of reply.
Look, I'm just thinking, and I need advice here, that really the issue is, as I said earlier, I think the issue isn't shooting. I think many of these horses, in the process of controlling the numbers and managing the numbers in the high country, many of them will end up being shot. And Councillor Buckley, I didn't say all. I know that many are rehomed, and that's a really nice and lovely outcome for these animals. But I know that many will be shot. And I'm just wondering whether we could alter the motion again. And because basically everyone around the table is saying aerial shooting is unacceptable and not addressing, and maybe, you know, the ground shooting from a distance, I mean, that's, but I do think whether we could, sorry, yes. Okay, I'm just wondering whether we could alter the motion again.
Thank you.
To take out aerial shooting. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to receive advice about whether I can accept a notice to alter the motion. Councillors, thank you. Ms De Costa, please.
What is the extent of the change? If it's material, it'll have to go through an amended motion process, but otherwise we can make minor tweaks. It's up on the screen. Do we know what the change actually is?
Councillor Greason, you indicated that you would like to propose another change to or a change to this motion. Could you explain to us what the change would be?
Could we go back to the first motion from the 4th of May? Please.
It is in your papers, councillors. If you need a reference point, it'll just take a minute to bring that up.
Would you like to adjourn? Mayor Yuri, you could also adjourn for 5 minutes.
Councillor Greason, would you like to work on some new wording? And if that's the case, I'll adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes while you come up with that wording.
I don't want to waste everybody's time on this issue, really. But
You'd like to go ahead and put that...
the purpose of my motion was because I just thought many of these animals are being shot anyway, and what we're concerned about is how they're being shot. So the language around that, or when they're shot, you know, so the language around that is, I guess, what I'm concerned about. And if we are going to have an open discussion with the Minister about this issue, I want it to be without caveats, I suppose. I wanted the opportunities to be there to explain the issues. Thanks.
No, sorry, I'm just going to ask you to stop for a second. I want to be clear about whether you want to propose an alternative motion, in which case I'm going to adjourn the meeting to sort it out. Otherwise, I'm going to put this motion, everybody's spoken on this current motion in front of us, and I think I should put that to the vote.
Put it to the vote, Mayor.
Thank you. So we're just going to ensure that the motion is up for everybody to see before we take the vote. So everybody has spoken on this motion. Councillor Greason has had the right of reply. I'm now going to put that motion to the vote. So all those in favour? Thank you. Against? The motion is defeated. I wondered, there was some discussion before this meeting that a division would be required. I wondered whether, Councillor Crook, you would like a division?
Request a division, yes please, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so would councillors please once again, those in favour of this motion, indicate that they're in favour of the motion? Thank you. So Councillor Crook, Councillor Greason and Councillor Uri. All those against the motion, please. Councillor Stowe, Councillor White, Councillor Allen, Councillor Van Dickel and Councillor Buckley. Thank you. That concludes the business of this meeting, and I would now like to close the meeting.